Alright. We live. Yes. Welcome to Flooded Cinema episode 32. This is the Australia Day special. Joined again by my lovely co-host Jacaranda. Say hello.
Hello.
And yeah, we're doing two Aussie classics. An older one and a more recent one. Just to sort of discuss and maybe, get some people that haven't heard of these films to watch them. Give them a bit of promo because they're both good movies, basically, which is a change for this show.
Yeah, this is a chance to educate the international audience.
Yes, yes, on Wake and Fright and Chopper. So we'll start with Wake and Fright. So it's got a little bit of a interesting story. Basically, it came out in the 70s, and it was not. It was a commercial failure at the time for a variety of reasons. I don't know. It was probably a bit, I don't know, weird, bit artsy fartsy or whatever. Um, and then the master negative, got lost, and then it got found again in 2004, and then it sort of had a resurgence slowly, but surely amongst all the hipster, art types in Australia, and I think it's slowly, internationally, people are gonna start knowing this as a classic '70s film, and it's got all the hallmarks of a film from that era, I would say. Um, I'd seen it once before, and had you seen it before, Jack?
No, I hadn't.
Oh, okay, but it's pretty much, yeah, a pretty amazing film in my opinion. Very interesting. What were your initial thoughts?
I was really impressed by it. It it's probably one of the tighter scripts I've ever seen because it does not waste any time at all.
No, yeah,
Yeah,
and yeah, the cinematography is great. The act, like all the elements are uh, pretty phenomenal. Um, and I love the sets. It's all filmed in this one country town, and when you're, particularly if you're Australian, you'll recognize what the pubs are like and what the that house is like. And I get, well, maybe not the shack. I don't know if I've lived in a shack like that before, but aside from that, but
you see a lot of them in Tasmania.
oh, okay, okay. I'm from a less wild part of the country, I guess. Um, all right, let me just make sure the audio is good here. I think we were peaking a little bit, but that's okay. I think it should be fixed up now. Yeah. So the plot is basically there's a international student teacher from England who's working in pretty much literally the middle of nowhere, to Bunda, and uh, because that's how the teacher contracts work. You just sort of get a lottery and you can get sent wherever, and that's just what you have to do. Um, and on his way back to Sydney for the school holidays, he stops off at what is the name of the town again? Uh, duh, duh, duh. Well, they call it the Yabba,
The Yabba, yeah, but that's
but
a short name for the
yes, which
actual
is Bundan Yabba.
wooden Yabba. Yep.
Yeah, and so as everything in Australia is shortened, yeah, so they shorten that to the Yabba. Um, and it's pretty much he's in the town, and he decides to do a bit of gambling to try and help him pay off his debt. And then, as in the spirit of pretty much every movie ever, he loses all his money, and then he has to, I don't know, he just sort of has to vibe and survive in the town.
He certainly does vibe.
um, yeah, I think the way I described this film before was it reminds me of Kafka wrote a story set in Australia, and if you've
Yeah.
ever read, some of Kafka's longer novels, like people always talk about Kafka-esque, meaning like confusing or weird or whatever. But what I get out of Kafka stories is more it's just all these extremely uncomfortable, just borderline like cringe-worthy or unsettling interactions between always the main character and all these like cast of weird characters that the main character meets during the story, and that's really how this movie sort of plays out. Um, he gets to the town and then he meets the Chips Rafferty, who's playing the soldier, the vet, basically. Is he?
Chips Rafferty plays a police officer.
Oh, it's the police officer. Right.
He's the sheriff of the town,
Yeah,
or deputy.
yeah, and it's just it's this overbearing sort of hospitality that all these
Which
characters show to him.
Chips Rafferty's sort of performance is it's a meta performance because he was famous for playing a lot of police officers in Australian films from the 50s and 60s. And also it's especially funny because obviously like the key component of the story is the clash between British and Australian culture,
Yes.
especially upper class Englishmen.
Yeah, middle to upper.
And-
Yeah.
Yeah, and the funny thing is that with the £10 poms, which were the British that were paid £10 to move to Australia,
Yeah.
there was a propaganda film called Bring Out of Britain,
Mm.
which was presented by Chips Rafferty.
That is funny. That's
Yeah.
funny. Mm. Yeah, and I think that culture clash. It's just so interesting because normally when you have these culture clash types of movies, like we've talked about Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence before, where it's English versus Japanese, or I guess in the case of Last Samurai, American versus Japanese. We seem to be watching a lot of Japanese movies in this show, but it's just interesting.
That's your yellow fever.
Yeah. But normally when you get these fish out of water things, it's I don't know, it's more obviously externally distinctly different, the cultures, whereas here it's this extremely subtle because it's a Brit, literally a middle class Brit going to a working class Australian town. It's just I don't know, it's just really interesting seeing the subtleties of Australian culture actually on screen, and it's interesting as well because I sort of think if I was in a similar situation to him, aside from certain elements that we'll get to later, it wouldn't really be that bad a situation.
Yeah.
It'd be unpleasant, but it's like everyone was just giving him beers and like being relatively nice to him anyways. It was just sort of a matter of he just was like too pommy to vibe it. Up until a point.
I suppose that's where I might be a bit more sympathetic with him because very, very recently I was a teetotaler. So it's like I'm
right.
still sort of, I am only just begun to sort of get into sort of drinking culture. So,
That's true.
when I was watching it, I was sort of like, yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
Being uncomfortable around people that are drunk.
Yeah, so the whole film, the whole time, everyone is constantly offering him beer, and they're not even. It's not even about like, oh, they want him to. They're not trying to trick him. They're not trying to trick him with their hospitality or anything like that. It's literally just, the culture is, if you're with someone, you have to be drinking together.
Yeah, like at no point in this film is anyone actually malicious towards him, really.
No, not in any way that we would sort of categorize that typically. It's yeah, I just love it. Like at the end of towards the end of the film, when that guy gives him a lift, and he says, "Oh, come on, let's take her over beer," And then
Yeah.
and he's just like, "What's wrong with you people?" He like sort of just has a freak out, and then the guy's like, I can't remember what he says, like, "Oh mate, just wanted to have a beer with you or whatever. You
Yeah.
weirdo." Yeah.
And then
And
and, and then after that, he yells at him again, I think.
yeah,
And then and then the Australian guy yells at him and says, "Listen to me, you are gonna have a beer with me."
yeah,
It's just this this overly aggressive hospitality. I
yeah,
was like, I will buy you a beer.
yeah. Because yeah, despite the fact that he loses all his money, everyone is just more than happy to give him food and shelter um, and whatever else. So it's just yeah, it's just interesting the having that culture, like I guess sharing on screen, and how it you definitely do feel uncomfortable because it's through the main character's performance, and it's just sort of the fact that he's stressed about the fact that he's lost all his money, he won't be able to go see his girlfriend, and various other things. But the thing is, he makes mistakes, and he's not. I wouldn't call him an everyman, obviously. Uh, like he is a character himself. It's not necessarily a blank. At least for me, it wasn't necessarily like a blank slate, and that's another thing. Sorry to keep harping on about this, but that's another thing I find interesting in Kafka books is the main characters are always weirdos themselves, which sort of just adds to the experience, like the whole surreal experience of the matter. And I think we get just how uncomfortable he gets, and some of the decisions he makes, like when he's flirting with that guy's daughter,
Mhm.
and he's because he has a girlfriend like back in Sydney, and it's just like he's just drunk and he's makes this not very good decision, and then they go out to sort of have a tumble, and then he throws up, and it's very funny. And then he comes back, and then all the guys are like just laughing at him. Yeah, that's great. Let me have a look at my notes here. Let's try and get some structure to what we're talking about here. So we have the main character who, uh, yeah, he's very much this extremely English-looking guy.
He looks a lot like Peter O'Toole,
Yeah, Gary
but with
Bond.
brown eyes.
Yeah, Gary Bond. Um, yeah, he's great. And then there's also Donald Pleasance. Probably has the
Yep.
best role in the film,
His dialogue is fantastic.
and his character is the most interesting character for sure.
He's the one you could empathize with the most. You're like, yeah, I get it.
Aspects of what he was saying, I could. Certain things he did, I don't think I would make the same decision. Um, but yeah, he sort of he's there as a mirror to the main character, basically, because both him and the main character are not from the town. They're alien to the town, and they're juxtaposed like in a pretty obvious way, in that the main character is wearing white and then Donald Pleasance is always wearing black, and they sort of represent like the film. I don't know. I mean, I think this film's actually pretty deep, and it's got a lot to say about certain different things. It's actually, there's a lot. It's an interesting film, and I think that's why I like it a lot, because it works. I always appreciate films when there's lots of different levels, or a few different levels that you can look at the movie. So, there's just the surface level, um, about this, the plot, which is good, and then there's the level of looking at it in terms of comparing these two characters, and their sort of what they represent and their worldviews, and then it's sort of like about society and things like that. I don't know. I don't have any coherent thoughts necessarily to pull about it, but it is very interesting.
Yeah, one of the interesting things is that it's it wasn't even directed by an Australian.
Really?
No, Ted Kochev is Canadian.
Wow.
I think he's ethnically Bulgarian, but he was born in Toronto and grew
That
up in Canada.
that is so trippy. What
Yeah,
the heck?
and it's he directed First Blood, the first Rambo film,
Ah, and I'm
and
looking now. He did.
Weekend at Bernie's.
Wow, what a bizarre filmography.
Yeah.
Huh. Um, I'm pretty. I mean, I think in some ways it would probably be easier for a non-Australian to direct this kind of a movie,
Hmm.
because I feel like an Australian wouldn't. It'd be hard to be introspective enough about Australian culture to.
Yeah, it can be difficult to make a piece of art about your own culture.
Yeah.
That's that's analyzing it and critiquing it.
Yeah. And it's based on a book, which was written by an English guy, I think, like a English migrant. So
Yeah.
again, yeah, it's. I guess it's more just like his feelings of what it's like to have to deal with Australians. And this is very much. I'd say there's like this culture is still quite present in non cosmopolitan Australians in like more rural places. It is still like this in a lot of ways.
Mhm.
Um, at least at least where I've been, it is in certain rural areas. Some rural areas it's just like a bunch of rich old people. That's where they go to retire or whatever. But there are places like this, especially mining towns and things like that, where because it depends on if it's a place where, well, this is not really related to the film, but just to get into it, but if it's like a place where everyone does meth, then it's quite different to this, because this movie is before just like drugs were even really a thing in Australia, um,
Yeah,
to a large extent.
the Aboriginals there weren't doing meth, you know.
No, it was well, no one even really smoked weed or anything at this point in Australian culture. It was just everyone just drank like a lot, um, and it's just, yeah, it's interesting time capsule. Um, yeah, great movie. Let's have a look at some of my other notes here. Some other great scenes. I love the bit where after he's lost all his money gambling. Oh, and the gambling itself is really interesting. Just the two up game, which I can't be like. How does the game work again exactly?
You literally just bet on whether it's going to be heads or tails.
Yeah, it's basically fancy flipping a coin.
Yeah.
Uh, and the scenes in there in that are great. Like just the number of actors and extras and stuff they've got in there, and you can feel like you can imagine how like sweaty and stuffy that room would be. Um, it's really good. Um, but I love the scene after he's lost all his money and he just sort of wakes up in his hotel and he's just like hungover and he just feels like shit because he's lost all his money. Just like looks out the window, just see like he's like, oh man, I'm like he's just it's sort of the realization I'm stuck in this town now.
Yeah.
Um, and then you have the receptionist like constantly sort of wetting herself with her hands with some water, and it's
Because it's
just
so
like
hot.
little, yeah, because it's so hot, and there's just these, yeah, little subtle things
Another
like that.
good thing about the filmmaking this is you feel the heat
Mm. Mm.
very well, similar to what's that Spike Lee film? Do the Right Thing. That's another
Mm.
film that also does a good job of conveying heat.
Yeah, I have not seen that one. That's the pizza place one.
It's it's Spike Lee.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, you feel the heat, and I think, I mean, I because this movie is such a cultural thing. I really would be curious to watch it with more like non-Australians, because we watched it with with a Swede by way of Syria. Um, I guess I don't know if he didn't. I don't know what he thought necessarily of the cultural things in it, but it would be interesting to watch it with more
He did.
people.
He did not like the film.
No,
He
no,
did say that.
yeah, which is fair. Which is fair enough because this is sort of there isn't really much of a plot after the first 20 minutes where he loses his money. It's just sort of him dicking around for an hour, and then like things sort of escalate in terms of how drunk and debauched everyone's getting. But other than that, like nothing. There's no twists and turns in the plot. There's no. There's not too much in the way of like fancy dialogue or like soliloquies or someone like giving a speech about X, Y, and Z. Which is nice because I mean sometimes that's good in a movie, but sometimes it's nice to just have things sort of play out more organically rather than a Tarantino or Coen Brothers thing where people give speeches and say parables and whatever all the time. You know what I mean?
The dialogue isn't in that style, but it's still excellent dialogue.
Yeah.
Especially, like we mentioned, Donald Pleasance's stuff.
Donald Pleasance. And yeah, let's get into his character. So basically, he's a disgraced alcoholic doctor who did work, presumably in a city somewhere, and then has since, it's unclear if he's on the run or if he's just like dead broke or like clearly there was some malpractice or there was some issue like that made him have to leave, become a defrocked doctor basically.
Yeah.
And he's now living in this town
he
shack.
said that he was an alcoholic.
Yes.
And he couldn't give it up or whatever.
Yeah.
Obviously, you can't practice drunk.
Well.
Most of the time. They don't like you practicing drunk.
No, that's a fair way to put it.
The man's trying to keep you down.
Yeah.
You're just trying to do surgery whilst drunk.
Yeah. It's anti-Irish discrimination.
Exactly.
But so his character, it's interesting, is basically he, like one of the first things he says is, "All the little devils so proud of their hell," or something like that. Because he's commenting on how everyone in this town is constantly saying how great the town is. And, from my perspective, there's nothing necessarily wrong with the town, but it's just like a town with one bar.
They're a bit degenerate.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't call it a nice place.
I mean, by today's standards.
Oh, yeah.
They're not, I suppose. But they're still far from an ideal. I mean, because they openly talk about the daughter of that guy. Just they all sleep with her.
Yeah.
She's the town bicycle.
Yeah. So that's like the first thing he says. And then that's a great way of writing it and picking up the fact that he's not from there.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. So his character is effectively, he came to the town and he sort of, as an alien from the town, and he accepted it and became sort of part of it, I guess, in his own way. And then the main character, it's like he has the option to sort of do the same thing, but yeah, he ultimately rejects it by the end of the film, and it's I find it funny the bit where he wakes up in Donald Pleasance's shack, and he offers him this sort of like plate of food, and then he starts eating it, and then he goes, "Oh, it's kangaroo, by the way," and then the guy's sort of like gags a little, because to me, like, eating kangaroo is not a big deal, but I guess to some like English guy who's like extremely hungover, the idea of it might be quite unpleasant. So I'm trying to think. What else have you got to say? What else should we mention?
If you're like a teenage girl who can't handle seeing actual animals die, do not watch this film.
Oh yeah.
Because they just went out with a ranger, this bush ranger party, bush ranger, and anyway, park rangers who were culling kangaroos.
Yeah, not bush ranger. Yeah.
And just film them, just blowing away these kangaroos.
Yeah, that's a great scene.
Yeah.
Well, yeah,
So
there's this. Yeah,
you do get to see actual animals just straight up die.
yeah. There's a
And
10 minutes of this movie is them just hunting
yeah,
kangaroos.
just actually full on just chasing them down with cars, almost hitting them.
And that
And
scene's
I'm pretty,
awesome.
yeah, and I'm pretty sure that the big dude is actually fighting a kangaroo there.
Yeah, and that guy is
It looked
crazy.
like an actual kangaroo. So
When they're driving, is that just the actors in the car? Like, it doesn't look like it's
it
stunt
looks
double.
like it. It looks like it's just the actors. Yeah, because you get shots of them in there whilst it's driving around.
Yeah,
So
it's crazy. 71. Like you.
you could do pretty much whatever you
Oh
want
yeah,
with it.
you could do whatever you want, but I'm just saying it's impressive for 71. This film, like, it's quite edgy for the time, and aside from I would imagine if this was I mean, they did remake it, and I'm assuming that was apparently really bad, but a more modern take on this, there would be more of a story. There'd be, like, some connection between the main character and the Donald Pleasance character would be revealed, or something. There'd be some twist, or, which, whatever, but there's not much going on, so it could seem like this movie is just sort of weird and boring if you
Mhm.
try and look at it through a modern narrative lens. But in terms of the content, it's pretty, yeah, it's still pretty edgy and uncomfortable. Even by modern standards, I would say.
Yeah. In the remake, I don't even think it's a British guy because he's played by an Australian actor.
Oh, he's just Australian.
He's just a young school teacher. Yeah.
Oh, let's see that.
It removes the whole.
That's the whole. There's a whole
point
point
of
to it.
the-
Yeah. Who? What's the Donald Pleasance character like in the remake? Did you watch the whole thing or?
No.
Oh, okay. Um.
David Wenham plays Jock, the police officer.
Okay.
He's a good actor. I'm not sure he quite fits that role.
The other thing I wanted to point out was, I mean, I don't know how familiar. Like, there's RSLs in Tasmania, right?
We do have soldiers, yeah.
What I mean to say is, you've been to. Sorry,
We have
let me start again.
RSLs, yeah.
You've been to RSLs before, right?
I've been to one once, yeah.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. Well, I used to. Anyway, well, okay, this is a little doxy, but whatever. Let's just say I may or may not have worked in an RSL for a long time, but basically, it's just funny to me the bit where, because at an RSL, every RSL in Australia at 5 o'clock, they stop. Everyone has to stop drinking and stand up, and they do the ode, which is like a remembrance for the fallen Australian soldiers throughout history.
Yeah.
And I love how in the movie it's framed as this, like, extremely disconcerting, weird thing.
Well, I had no idea they did that.
Yeah, yeah. I think, is it 5 or 6? No, it's 6 o'clock. They do that.
It makes sense that they do.
Yeah, and
I was just like, oh, that's interesting, and then moved on.
yeah, but it was just funny to me since I have, like, been to lots of RSLs and whatnot. It was just so normal to me to, like, see it
Yeah.
framed like that in a film. Was quite funny.
Yeah,
Um,
because I was a teetotaler, I've just never been to never stayed around one long enough to drink there or anything.
Oh, well, I'll kick you of that habit soon. We haven't really described this movie in too much detail. We've sort of jumped around,
Well,
but I think that's.
I don't want to describe it too much because neither of these films really, because they're both quite good.
See, that's the
And,
problem. That's the problem when we do an episode with two good movies.
On a good movie, yeah, that people haven't seen.
Yeah, like, when we do two good movies, then we don't want to really talk about them too much because then it's like we're spoiling it. But I mean, we can get into. Well, okay, let's get into it a little bit with, like, the themes of Wake and Fright. So basically, it is sort of just about Donald Pleasance is kind of like this. He represents this. It's almost like this cynic, absolute rejection of any kind of what would you would consider sort of these modern civility, modern just being pleasant or like held back by inhibitions, like particularly like English Victorian sensibilities of politeness, and it's just he's like this ultimate rejection of these things. Like he doesn't work, doesn't is like proud of the fact that he's unemployed and doesn't work and do it or do anything. He just drinks all day. Um, and like the other thing is he's got a beard, number one, and he dresses all in black, and that's an opposite to the main character, who's dressed in white and is clean shaven throughout the whole film, basically. So, um, anyway, that's what I got out of that sort of thing, and then yeah, I just thought it was just interesting. Um,
And you have because when he's on the way to the Yabba,
yeah,
you have
Yep.
yo, we're streaming right now, sir.
Should I leave?
Yes. Sorry,
professionalism.
very professional over here. We just had someone jump in. That's okay. Sorry, what were you saying, Jack?
We're gonna have to get rid of the Scottish. Anyway, but you have when he's on his way to the town. There's a scene in the train, and the guys offer him a beer,
Yeah.
and he turns them down.
Yes.
But then, after he gets out of the hospital, from in the Yabba, he gets on a train back to the town that he was teaching in, and there's another group of guys, and they offer him a beer and he accepts this time.
Yeah.
So there is a sort of visual representation.
There's a bit of a character arc for
Yeah.
him. Like he, I don't know. I guess he becomes more Australian by the end of the movie or something.
A bit, yeah.
Yeah.
He hasn't gone fully native, but
No. I find it interesting. Yeah, the only Aboriginal guy in the whole film is on the train at the beginning, basically. And he doesn't say or do anything. He's just there, and like I just find it funny that within the context of the film, he's just there to be like trippy. Like, dude, there's an Aboriginal on the train.
there's an Aboriginal on the train, and then there's when he goes to that truck driver and asks him to take him to Sydney. That truck driver is talking to an Aboriginal man.
Oh yeah,
So I think there's two in the entire film,
yeah,
and they don't have any lines at all.
no, yeah. Which I thought it was. I think that's pretty deliberate in some ways because I don't know, in like most of these towns, because I assume this is like central or northern Australia, or maybe it's just western New South Wales or something like that. But in those areas, there do tend to be more Aboriginals. But yeah, I don't know what else there is to say about this movie. Aside from the fact that it's pretty great, it's a really great Australian film. In terms of like thrillers and like horrors and just sort of weird movies, it's pretty unique. I don't know if I can think of many other movies like this, off the top of my head at least. Yeah, very unique, interesting film. Like if you're interested in 70s films or Australian films, this is definitely one to watch, I would say.
Yeah.
Anyway, we can give our closing thoughts later. Now Chopper. Do you wanna explain Chopper, Jack?
This
Maybe maybe
trying to explain Chopper.
maybe explain who he is, and then you can explain how the film works.
Okay, so what is he? He's Mark. Mark Chopper Reed is a famous Australian criminal.
Yeah.
Who he was sort of famous for. I think 'cause he was a bit famous before he wrote his biographies.
Yeah, he was a no. He
At,
was
at the
like,
very, yeah, he was known especially in Victoria.
yeah.
But then when he wrote his, I
Well,
think
I don't know
he
if he
wrote.
wrote it, but yeah,
Well,
when
he's
he,
illiterate, so probably
yeah,
not. But had someone write
yeah,
books for him that he claimed he wrote.
yeah.
He wrote children's books as well.
Mm,
But uh, sort of they were semi-autobiographical novels, sort of, because it's dubious as to what he actually did.
yeah,
But his first one being, I think it was just called Chopper.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. But pretty
yeah,
much
and
he was
that's his. That's about the first 19 murders he supposedly committed.
Basically, he's a criminal. He was just a famous criminal in the like
He was a
the
hitman.
80s and 90s, in particular.
He was a hitman
He was a hitman.
for the Melbourne mafias.
Yeah. And he, yeah, gained a lot of notoriety. He was famous in the news and stuff here, and then yeah, these books came out and became more famous just nationally throughout all of Australia. And this movie focuses on two like particular incidents in his life, basically. And
It leads up to what made him, like, the moments before he became very famous across Australia
yeah,
and the rest of the world.
yeah. So it basically, yeah, it's got two major chapters of his life that it follows, and then there's sort of like a wraparound thing with the news incident. But the movie itself, I would say knowing a bit about Chopper would probably help watching the movie, but obviously you don't need to like research him or anything like that.
Yeah, it's a bit more for an Australian audience. That
Yeah.
they assume you roughly know who he is.
Yeah. It would be
But,
pretty weird watching it not knowing who he was.
Yeah. I think you'd still get a lot out of it, even if you didn't, though.
Yeah, yeah. But
Just because it's such a well-made film.
yeah, and the script's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, and all the performances are great, particularly.
I don't know how much of his dialogue is taken directly from the book, like how much he supposedly to have actually said, or how much of it was written by the writers.
Yeah.
But either way, the dialogue's great.
Yeah. And obviously it's a career high performance for Eric Bana, who you people would probably know as, who did he play in Troy again?
You people, come on, man.
Yeah, you people. My little minions. The listeners to the show.
He played
Hector. He played Hector. And
he played the Hulk.
Yes.
In the original.
Oh yeah. In the
Ang Lee one.
The Ang Lee one. Wow, so strange to think about that now.
A lot of people forget he's even Australian. Like,
really? I guess
a lot of Americans don't realize that he's Australian.
Oh. Yeah. Well, anyway.
Because they sort of think of Australians as being like dirty blonde sort of dudes rather than
Hugh
a
Jackman.
wog.
People know Hugh Jackman as Australian, right?
Yeah, but he isn't a wog.
No.
Eric Bana is Greek.
True. But yeah, and it's interesting getting a West Orient gentleman to play an Anglo guy, because Chopper's Anglo, like the actual guy.
Yeah. It works though. He looks a lot like him.
Yeah. Yeah. But basically, the movie covers two incidents. So the first is his time in prison in the 70s, where he...
Sorry, correction. He's Croatian. Apologies.
Oh, well then...
Close enough.
He's Croatian? That
Yeah.
explains everything.
Close enough. Balkans.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, that's why they work, I guess, then. Because Banner is clearly Macedonian. So, anyway, we will not delve into Balkans racial or ethnic discussion today. As two Anglos, we will not be doing that. But yeah, he is amazing in it. He completely... You don't even think you're watching an actor at all with him. It's just...
Yeah.
It's really... If you have grown up in Australia and you have seen like the news clips of the actual guy, and then you watch this movie, it's really uncanny. It's very strange. Because
For a lot of people have almost replaced the actual guy with Eric Bana in their mind.
Yeah. Because he just... So I think in preparing for the role, he hung out with Chopper a fair amount. Reed suggested himself, actually, that Banner played him.
Interesting.
Wow. Because was it Banner that played him in that comedy show?
Full Frontal.
Yeah.
I wasn't aware that he did Chopper.
In that show? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I wasn't aware.
Or maybe not.
Well, I
That's
never really
interesting.
watched Full Frontal, obviously, because it was well before I was born.
Well, anyway. Okay. But anyway, the first incident takes place at Pentridge, which is sort of the most famous prison in Victoria. And it's pretty much Chopper and his gang have some dispute with another gang, or there's like tensions between him and another gang. And he just needlessly escalates the tensions. Just out of his own sort of paranoia and he has this weird complex where he sort of just assumes everyone's out to get him all the time, and he also wants clout, and like you get a real sense of his character. It's really interesting. This film.
You sort of get this sense that he wants to be more than he is, in a way. Because later in the film, he sort of makes up these fantasies in his head that the police are giving him permission to just kill people,
Yeah.
or to kill criminal drug
Yeah.
dealers.
Yeah.
You know.
And there's some that they're really funny. So this movie is, would you call it a dark comedy? Or it's a...
I'd say you would, yeah.
I don't know.
Because
It's
the
like
comedy comes from rather than
Yeah.
sort of outright jokes, just from the bizarre circumstances
Yeah.
that he's in, and his personality interacting with regular people.
Yeah. Or with people that are less unhinged than him.
Yeah.
So...
That's what shock therapy does to you.
Did he get shock therapy?
Yeah, when he was 14, I think.
Ah.
Because he was molested as a kid,
Oh.
I believe.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. Sadly. But yeah, the prison stuff's great. It's just... And particularly when he sort of gets betrayed by his gang. And, like... they're just stabbing him. And he's just sort of stood there and is like, oh, why are you doing this, mate? And
Yeah.
he's not like falling down or
He
in
goes,
pain or
"Now,
anything.
come on, mate. If you stab me again, you're gonna kill me, alright?"
You know, and yeah, I love that.
And when he does the first stab, he goes, "It's a bit too early in the morning for kung fu, isn't it?"
Yeah, he's got so many funny. He actually has a lot of jokes. Like I would say, Yeah, it's like a biopic drama, like dark comedy kind of thing, basically. A character study is probably the best way to think of it, because there isn't really a through line with the plots in the two sections of the film.
Not really.
They're
I
same
mean, it's yeah.
characters, but
They're two parts of his life that deal with similar people and similar instances of him escalating things.
yeah,
That's the connection there.
yeah,
They're both segments are analyzing the similar parts of his personality.
yeah, yeah. Um, it's I'm trying to think what else is there to say about the prison section. Really.
Oh well, there's when he cuts his ears off.
Oh right, yeah. So that's the other thing
This
that
is
made
a
him
this is
famous.
probably something we should say. Is this is a very violent film. It is.
Yes. Yeah.
It's.
I
I'd say
mean,
it's actually. It's there isn't much violence in it, but when there is, it's very.
gory.
It's just depicted as it is. Like
Yeah.
something that they also don't do in this film is say when a character gets shot later, they don't have these absurdly large, like blood sprays or anything. You know, there
Yeah.
aren't these over dramatic squibs. He
Yeah.
takes a bullet in the head, falls
Yeah.
over, and then he bleeds out later, like you actually
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
It's a film that when it has it, it's depicted fairly accurately.
Yeah.
It's like it's a bit too accurate almost, because like when he cuts his ears off,
Yeah.
it bleeds a decent amount, like it's just dripping from his ears.
Yeah.
And then they have when they have another shot of him having his other ear cut off, you see the blood starts pouring out in spurts with the beat of his
Yeah.
heart.
Yeah.
It's a bit too sort of realistic.
But yeah, he cuts his. That's one other thing that he's like extremely famous for is he had his own ears cut off in order to uh,
Get out.
get out of prison and put into a psychiatric ward because people were trying to kill him.
Yeah.
Um, so that's his first incident. Um, but yeah, the prison stuff's great. It's like a good introduction to his character, and it's cool how minimalist it is, just with the, because obviously everyone's uh, just dressed as prisoners, and then there's only like 2 or 3 sets in that entire section. Um,
Yeah, I really like the cinematography in this film as well.
yeah,
I like the '90s sort of film look.
yeah,
It's especially, it almost gave me Japanese vibes. If that makes sense, but it's probably just because '90s films that I'm most familiar with are a lot of Japanese stuff.
yeah. I would
Probably
say.
why.
I mean, I understand.
There's also like the prison part specifically
Yeah, yeah. The colors.
because the color palette, the slightly more clean
Yeah,
sort of aesthetic of it reminded me a lot of Japanese films.
yeah, yeah. It reminded me of yeah, stuff like that for sure. Which is I thought was interesting. I guess we can move on to the next section. So the next section is 10 years later, I believe.
Yes. Yeah.
So he's out of prison. He goes and he meets his girlfriend. Um, and
Who is a prostitute.
who is a prostitute, and there's a very funny line where he says, "Who have you been effing?" And then she says, "Everyone, I'm a prostitute."
And he says, "Not like that. I mean, who have you been kissing?"
Yeah. As in, yeah, he wants to know her loyalty to him outside of her profession, which is a very funny line. And pretty much there's a guy that he runs into, Neville Bartos, who, like, some years ago they had beef, and Chopper ended up shooting him in the leg.
I'm pretty sure it was. I'm not sure if Chopper had actually been hired to do a hit on him. I think it might have been that,
Yeah.
and he was sort of dubious as to what exactly he was meant to do with him, and he initially thought to just kill him, but he
Yeah.
decided to just shoot him in the leg.
Yeah. because he owed money to someone at that point.
Yeah.
But at this point, his leg is more or less recovered, and he's now, one of the best coke dealers in Melbourne or whatever, top coke dealers in Melbourne, and he's doing really well money wise and everything. And he runs into Chopper, and he's paranoid. Chopper is now paranoid that he still has it out for him, even though it's been years and years and years, and now he's rich and everything. And like, Chopper's not even really like gang affiliated that much at this point. He's just sort of vaguely, I don't know, in the crim world, I guess. But I mean, at least the way the film portrays it is there's no reason that Chopper should necessarily be particularly worried about this guy. But Chopper, because he's paranoid, he's just this sort of schizo-paranoid guy, gets it in his head that, oh, he still wants to, he wants to kill me, or he wants to do something to me because of his leg. So and then, which may or may not have been the case, may or may not have been a reasonable thing to think about. But then his solution is, I'm gonna go over to his house and rob him, like at gunpoint.
Yeah.
So, and that's the thing he always does. When he's paranoid, and it's just really interesting as a character study, because it's like, you see, when he gets paranoid, he acts in a way to is like, I don't know, justify his paranoia, or like bring his fears to life, basically. Like
he basically, it's almost like a way of, if I have these paranoid delusions, well, one way of them no longer being delusions anymore is to just make them real.
Yeah.
I will aggravate people into actually wanting to do these things to him.
Yeah. And that's a really funny scene as well, when he goes over to Neville's house, and he goes because they had a run in at a club, and he goes over and he's initially saying, "Oh, I just want to come over to apologize to you, Neville." And then Neville is just like, "Oh, okay, fine, you can come in." And then there's that great sequence of them doing coke, and I thought that was it was cute, how
The frame rate.
yeah, the frame rate of them talking was slowed down, but then there was like ADR of them talking was like the normal speed or whatever. However they did that, that bit was cool. And then basically he just like shoots Neville, and he's like,
Yeah, he says you're gonna give me some money.
"Yeah, you better produce some fucking cash or I'll fucking shoot you."
Yeah. He says someone's told me that you're gonna give me some money.
Yeah. Yeah, he just frames everything in this weird way. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. What else have I got written down here? Oh, the other great scenes are, there's all these little interludes with him talking to these like cops at various restaurants and stuff. And it's just, you get the impression that at this point he's just like a regular CI, like he's just supposed to be telling people who's who and what's what, but he's like got it in his head that the cops, as you mentioned earlier, the cops are basically giving him carte blanche to be this sort of bizarre vigilante justice dealer, and like the cops are saying, we don't condone you do anything like that, and he's sort of like, yeah, I get what you're saying, and then the cop's like, no, we seriously do not do it. He just sort of gives them a wink. It's great. Yeah.
And there's the way he's talking to them, and this some wog comes in with his girlfriend.
Oh yeah.
And he just pulls his slips his cock out of his pants.
Yeah.
And just keeps talking to the police officers.
Yeah. Yeah. Just hilarious.
And then because after he shoots Neville Bartos, he takes him to the hospital.
Yeah.
Like he organizes for all of Bardos's men to like carry him out to his car,
Yeah.
and he stays with him until he's taken to the hospital, which is this bizarre thing that he denies doing.
Yeah. Why would
Um,
I? Yeah. Um.
and then after um Neville Bartos gets out of the hospital, now Neville Bartos actually hates him
Yeah. And wants to kill him.
and yeah, wants to kill him, and so he organizes for him to be killed at the Bojangles Club.
Yeah.
And, and it's funny because they've organized for this guy. Is it Tommy the Turk
Yeah.
to go in there and then sort of entice him out to the car park?
Yeah.
But Tommy takes him to the wrong car park.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is that Tommy has not actually given Chopper any reason, any
Yeah.
reason to think that he wants to hurt him.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
because Chopper is so fucking paranoid,
Yeah.
he
He kills him anyway.
he shoots him in the head with his shotgun.
Yeah. It's a pure like. He's correct, but for like the wrong reasons,
Yeah.
which is great.
And then that scares the shit out of the people that were
Gonna kill him.
that were gonna kill him, and they drive away.
Yeah.
And then because of that, and he comes up with actually quite a good story about how the Turk tried to grab his gun,
Yeah.
and but he forgot to pull the hammer back,
Yeah.
and so it was self-defense in that moment.
Yeah.
And then because the cops find out that these people were actually planning to kill him,
Yeah.
he manages to get away with it,
Yeah.
despite the fact that technically in that moment he had murdered the Turkish dude.
Yeah. It's a classic Euronymous situation.
Yeah.
Um. Yeah, and that's like pretty much the end of the movie, and then we get the wraparound of the news reporter talking to him,
Mhm.
and we get the other aspect of his character, which is not just paranoia, but this sort of desire for fame and attention and clout, basically. And then
Yeah.
the movie ends with him like alone in his cell,
Yeah.
and you sort of get the whole like, ultimately he is this lonely guy, and that's the sense you get throughout the whole film, is that he's this lonely guy, that his whole persona is an act.
Mhm.
And you get that some of the times, like for instance when he stabs that guy in the prison, immediately after he stabs him, he like regrets it and feels sick and is like, oh, what have I done, what have I done? Well, not really like
Yeah.
that, but he's sort of like, oh, Keithy, you're right, mate, you're right.
Yeah.
And
Tries to throw him a cigarette.
yeah. Yeah. So yeah, it's an amazing character study.
So Chopper at the end when he's being interviewed by that woman, he has another good line. It's like, what is it? I'm just a bloody normal bloke who likes a bit of torture.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good one. I don't know what else there is to say about Chopper, really.
You should watch it.
Uh,
And you should watch the director's other stuff as well.
is he the guy that did Snowtown?
No, that's Justin Kurzel. This is directed by Andrew Dominic,
Oh, right.
who directed the film that with a name too long to say and Killing Them Softly.
That's right. We just discussed this. And then One More Time with Feeling. Oh, a documentary about Nick Cave. Oh, okay. And then he hasn't
Yep.
done anything since. Oh, he's got a movie coming out. Oh, okay.
About Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah. Wow, for a debut feature, Chopper, that is pretty bloody amazing.
Yep.
Wow. That is very impressive. He went to Swinburne Film School. That's interesting.
No, that's one of the ones that I considered going to.
Oh, really? Okay.
I think I got in, but I didn't go to it.
And then where'd you end up again? And what
I'm
room
not-
are you in?
Yeah, I'm not doxing myself.
Yeah. Well, now everyone knows you're not at Swinburne.
Yeah.
So
There you go. You know which
yeah.
university I'm not studying at.
I think yeah, that's pretty much. This is a good Australia Day episode. We just thought we'd do two two good movies that we can recommend to pretty much anyone that would be watching this show would enjoy. Like certainly Chopper, I'd recommend to pretty much anyone. Like if you like Tarantino movies, that's my baseline. If you like Tarantino movies, you'll probably like Chopper, I would say. Wake and Fright, I don't know. If you like The Shining or stuff like that, maybe that's more similar. I'm trying to think of what's a more mainstream thing it's similar to. I don't
I
know.
don't know really.
You should probably just watch it anyway because it's interesting. It's something different. Wake and Fright.
Yeah.
Um, yeah. Well. Yeah.
What's up,
Happy.
Negroes?
We're streaming, bro.
You're not streaming.
We are streaming.
I
Anyway.
kicked him out.
Very professional people around here. Two in my episode. Man.
All right. Goodbye, everyone.
Goodbye.